with the news covered, then we will move on to our main topic today here on Mastering Dungeons. We are going to continue our world spanning, realm diving look into Planescape, Book One, Sigil and the Outlands. We've covered Chapter 1, which looked at character options, and we covered part of Chapter 2, looking at Sigil, the City of Doors, the Cage. And now we are going to finish Chapter 2 by looking at the factions and the different wards of Sigil. So, we talked about the Lady of Pain really quickly last time. Who she is, what she does. She's basically the Deus Ex Machina, plot point, the thing without a stat block. So this is the game master's ability to move pieces without the players being able to counter it in a game mechanical way. We talked about the Debus, the servants who go around and do the Lady of Pain's bidding and communicate via visual illusions in the form of rebuses. Which is its own special joy and or pain, depending on how you look at it. We talked about the mazes, where the Lady of Pain will send naughty adventurers and or inhabitants of Sigil.
Yeah, apparently even entire
escape
factions.
Unless you can find it, apparently. And we talked about the Lady of Pain's control of all the portals, where she can lock things down and make it impossible for anyone to get into or to leave Sigil. And we left it there. Now we are going to get into the factions. And I'm going to take a big sip of water and let Teos lead us into this topic.
And I think one of the things that's really fascinating is putting this all together, right? That you've got this city that has portals that only open, I guess, with her permission, with the Lady of Pain's permissions. You have factions that the concept of them is that they're sort of these iconic philosophical concepts that they represent, but these also translate to city functions like the law, the jails, things like that, the chaos and disruption. And these iconic things then play roles in the city and, in fact, color the city itself. And the city is divided into wards, as we'll talk about later. And those wards are colored by the factions that are strongest in them. And if you have a faction leave or a new one begin, this will change the city itself. And that's a really fascinating concept. I like it. I immediately want to go, cool, how do I know how to do something with that as a DM, right? And I immediately think, boy, I hope that the attached adventure helps me, or the one inserted in the slipcase, helps me work with that, because that's a really fun idea if I can understand how to apply it.
Yep. And for me, when I read this, I remembered from the original edition of this setting that, the factions were there and they were very important, and that some people loved them and some people ignored them. And it made me think of the launch of 5th edition with the factions that they used in the Forgotten Realms, and how you can tie them to stories, or you can tie the characters to one of them, or you can set the characters against a faction, and what a good tool they are as long as they are used well. And as you say, Teos, the question is, how do you use them well? And I don't know if anything used them. The Adventures League started by using them quite well.
Yeah.
Because you could put your character in a faction and then you could have different goals or different stories based on the faction that you were in. But that takes a lot of work.
And even Tyranny of Dragons,
as soon as
Tomb of Annihilation, right? Through Tomb, I'd say, and a little bit and beyond that, and we see glimpses, but they were often used really well. And I think what made the difference is, I know, and you saw this too, we got to see from the inside various glimpses into how well Wizards, how thoroughly Wizards worked on the 5 factions to try to make Harper's and Lord's Alliance and all of this really be comprehensible to any partner, right? Whether you were writing in the Adventurers League or you were Kobold Press working on the first adventure, you understood these factions and the work was done. And I think that over time, they kind of forgot that they'd done this much work. And it was just sort of assumed that you'll just weave in the factions. And so they get weaker and weaker over time, right? But you need that. You need that way to make it so memorable that you know exactly what to do with this faction and how they fit into society and what to run, how to use them, right? The Zentarum are an obvious how to use. The Emerald Enclave are an obvious how to use. Even the Harpers, they're generally pretty obvious in a adventure that you're writing once you understand them. Will these be that way?
Yeah. I'm thinking of the D&D movie in this sense, because we as veteran players and aficionados of the Forgotten Realms understood that, oh, this prison, it's run by the Lord's Alliance.
Yeah.
Oh, the Harpers, they're generally they're the good guys who look out for things.
And take away
the
bad
Emerald
artifacts,
Enclave,
right?
that's
They take away all those bad artifacts and put them
the
into
Emerald
place.
Enclave.
Yeah.
Exactly. The Emerald Enclave, yes, they're looking out for nature. And so we recognize those connections. Someone who didn't know anything about Forgotten Realms or anything about D&D could still partake of the story, and they didn't need to know those connections. They could just say, okay, well, these are the authorities who are running the prison. These are the forest dwellers who want to save the forest. These are the good guys who want to protect the land from the evil artifacts. We don't need to know their names. They are just a general trope.
Yeah.
And that has power, but that also detracts from the power of those groups in terms of the stories that you're telling when they become so generic that they just stand in for anything that they represent. So when I see 12 or more factions in Planescape, it heartens me to say, well, okay, now we're going to have really niche factions in terms of what they do, but you're also making a lot of factions to have to keep track of and differentiate between the other factions. So the first question that I wanted to ask you is one you asked already, maybe in different wording, which is, what are some great ways to lean into factions, especially in Planescape, to make a memorable campaign while avoiding some of the pitfalls that we've been talking about?
Yeah, and I'll tie this into another thing that I think the classic did that you don't see in this edition, which is there was a lot of language thrown around, right? There were all these terms like Burke and even the cage, right? There was slang that was used all the time, and this, along with factions, were sort of tools to help you get into character. And I think that the concept of the original Planescape, and it feels like it's much softer here. Right now, it's an option, but it was really supposed to be that you were a member of a faction. At least that's how I always saw Planescape, and how I saw it played. So by being part of a faction, you had to choose your role within the city, or you were going to join and choose that role in the city. And then the conflicts were expected to happen, right? The philosophers with clubs aspect of old Planescape, where not only is it clubs as in groups, but as in beating each other and warring with one another. And you were supposed to kind of argue in this slang against even the other players, which was interesting.
Yeah. So making the characters part of a faction is good. Moving into and out of the alignment with other alignment in terms of, coming together to share a goal and then working against each other, watching these alliances shift becomes more important if you are within one of the factions to not just watch it, but to make it happen.
Yeah.
One thing I would add then is if you do make characters part of a faction, have dissent within the faction itself. Maybe for the first couple levels, everything's hunky-dory and everyone's working towards the same goal. But having some internal strife within the faction gives the characters a little more drama in their existence. It gives them something to rub up against that they thought was smooth, and now it's a burr that they need to work out.
Yeah, great.
Any other thoughts along the lines of using factions?
Um, ideally, I think the questions I had reading this section is, are these supposed to be color for the city? Because if you think of typical cities, right, like the people who run the laws, the people who are the guards, who are the guilds, whatever, like those are often sort of color and they impact play, but they aren't by default opposition unless the particular plot of the adventure takes us into opposition. And one of the things I wondered is to what extent factions are supposed to be exerting their will and presence sort of not just onto but against the characters, and should the characters be responding kind of against them or with them. And that's a part that sort of confuses me. Even when I look at the add-on product that's all about the mortuary, I'm like, is the idea that I come into mortuary sort of, I think, fighting it, but then a lot of the encounters are sort of helping it, and that I'm not sure what's happening here. Like what is the role? What is the role of factions at a zoomed out level within the Planescape campaign? Is it color? Is it interest level?
Yep.
Maybe it's everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that goes along with a couple other tips I have, which is don't introduce them all at once
Hmm.
and let the players ferret out what the factions are rather than just doing a lore dump. Make
Yeah.
it something that they're excited to learn about, and it's important that they
Hmm.
learn about. And finally, understand your players' tolerance for the philosophy
Hmm.
part of this. Because there is a lot of, I don't like alignment because it tries to do too much with too few words.
Hmm.
Uh, this to me is along those same lines. Now that's a personal thing. Other people might disagree, but it's the same thing here, uh, where you want these factions to motivate play, to entertain, but you don't want it to turn into a philosophical debate that really extends outside of the game. So, like, does a small difference in the philosophies of the Bleak Cabal and the Doomguard, who are normally quite well aligned, make things interesting for your story? Will players be like, "Ooh, these two factions are very very similar. There's this one difference, and now they're at war with each other about it."
Hmm.
That could be motivating, and it could be cool, or it could be like, let's let's discuss the philosophy of nihilism and what it really means, and why both factions are wrong and this game is stupid because no one understands what nihilism really is,
Yeah,
right? That sort of thing. So bring that into focus.
and I think what I want, and it's perfect for Planescape, right? Because Planescape should be this larger than life world or city. Um, in a typical campaign, if say somebody we know has been put in jail, well, you go talk to the jail, and you assume that the jail is just people that do what jails do, right? And so maybe they're corrupt or maybe they're not, but you're just going to go deal with them and see how to get them out there. In Planescape, this is a faction, and they have agendas and these beliefs and these powers, and they are part of the magical fabric of the world, versus you would probably expect the people in a jail, even in the Forgotten Realms, to be quite mundane in general. They might have a spellcaster on staff, but they're not, right? They're not like planar or whatever. And in this case, they are. And they've got these big power things that are going on, and in fact, are part of the fabric of Sigil. So that's where it gets interesting. And I think that is a really cool idea. If I can make that sing as a DM, then amazing. Now I feel like I'm in some great movie, right? Where like you don't just go talk to the people who are running the laws. You don't just go to the courts. Like going to the courts is a big deal because they're this faction. Well, how do I do that? What do I do as DM and as player to make that a really cool experience? Hmm.
Mhm. And so, as Teos said, on the outer planes, belief shapes reality. That's a quote from the book. So we know that the Lady of Pain is all powerful, but we're told the factions and the members can remold not just the planes, but Sigil as well. And we were told that the map is always changing
Yeah.
because the city itself is always changing. So you can use that to give your players a little more interesting background and a little more interesting setting, but also allow them to change the world through messing with or joining with the different factions.
Yeah. Hmm. Um,
Factions are
yeah.
led by fact. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, the factals, who are the term for the leader of any one faction. These have their own entities, personalities, they're very lightly touched upon, but still they are shaping the direction in which the faction goes. And one of the things that's presented here is that it's clear that the factal in general is not operating with an iron fist. They have a lens, as any kind of world leader does. They have a lens through which they see where the faction should head, and this may please some, but not all members of the faction, which I thought that was interesting.
So those factals become a key or a lock through which the characters can a key through which the characters can unlock certain things. Whether it be taking control of a faction or moving the direction of a faction. And if you move a direction of a faction, then you can move the direction of Sigil as a whole. So they are important. They are the boss monster in whatever combat role playing exploration that you want to hinge your adventures on. So it's good to have those things there, and they're spelled out well in this book, and they are well described.
Yeah.
So let's just get right to it. Let's talk about these factions. We are told that factions rise and fall, and so at any point, any of these factions could completely lose power, completely be wiped out if the Lady of Pain allows it or makes it happen. And there are also some minor factions that could fizzle out or ascend to one of great power. Let's briefly touch on these factions. We'll start with the Ethar, who claim that the gods are frauds. They run a spy network from their headquarters of the Shattered Temple, and they act when a religion begins to gain too much strength.
Yeah, it's interesting. This idea of
I'll
like,
pause there to let you.
yeah, I mean, so the concept is that they are supposed to discover the secret behind the multiverse because it's not, oh, there are gods creating it. There's something behind that. So if we can get to what that is, then we would have, I don't know, power, understanding, whatever it is. And so they're constantly looking into what all the other religions are doing. Okay. And and then I ask myself, well, what are they doing in the city? That part's clear. What does a character who's a member of them do? And that's where it gets a little interesting, right? Like, but fun. I think I can work with this, right? I like them.
Yep. Okay. Next, we have the Bleak Cabal, who find no sense in the multiverse. And because there is no meaning, they work to ease the suffering of others. They sort of run the hospitals, right? They run the centers to ease people's pain for the most part. But there is sort of a nihilistic view that they hold as well, which could seem to run contrary to this wanting to help people, because if nothing matters, then why bother helping someone? That could
Yeah,
be easily twisted.
it's a fundamentally strange one. This is one I think I read many times trying to understand it. Like, nothing matters, so we better ease everybody's suffering. Okay, I guess. But so it's a little
So
strange, but
suffering matters. So therefore, something matters.
something
Right.
matters. I don't know. Yeah, and maybe what it
Yeah.
really is, it's less that nothing matters, but nothing. There is no plan, right? There is no ultimate answer, and in a world without answers, then I guess it means that most people are misguided, and so therefore they need help because nothing will just come and help them, right? Nothing will magically lift you up from your sorry state, so let me offer you sanctuary and healing. Okay, sort of.
Along those same lines, next is the Doom Guard, who celebrate destruction and decay. Uh, okay, so, but they don't try to speed it up, it says. They don't, they celebrate it, but they don't necessarily do it, but they do.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, they see, yeah, it's sort of,
Yeah, maybe the best
I read
examples.
it like you, I read this several times.
Yeah, they run the armory, and so maybe that's sort of the example of like, we give everybody weapons because that's sort of a natural way that you will cause destruction. And they give this idea of a tree is
Mhm.
cut to build a house. So you sort of destroyed to build, and then the house will eventually collapse or burn, so that thing that you built will fall apart. So you're sort of celebrating that, and you want the end to be like everything's destroyed, but you're not speeding it up. And I feel like they just put that in there. I feel like these factions compared to second edition, but I'm no expert, so I'd have to go back and compare. But these feel like they are less volatile, less conflict oriented than the previous ones, and so that the Doom Guard, are not trying to destroy everything, and let's say most of them aren't. Therefore, you can get along with them or be a member of them more easily, maybe.
Right. Yeah, I got that as I was reading through and when I knew of the old ones, I got that exact same idea,
Yeah.
which was they want all of these to potentially be good guys, but to potentially be bad guys, but to potentially be something the players join, but
Yeah.
potentially be something the players fight against. Uh, so let's look at the Fated next. Those who take all they can and more. Basically entitled capitalists. They want they believe in the 1%, and they believe that because they think they are the 1%.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And they're the tax
they're the tax
collectors, right?
collectors.
Perfect.
Yep. 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 Uh, Next is the Fraternity of Order, who discover laws to find truth, and they administer the laws in the high courts.
Hmm.
You want to
Yeah.
take
They
the
have
next
this.
couple?
Well, the fraternity order has this thing about axioms and the idea that like the laws that you're finding are all good, but if you can uncover like a fundamental truth, an axiom, then you gain power. And if you were to find all the axioms, then all power would be yours, which is an interesting belief that is sort of like, really? You really believe that? Okay, sure. Like, let's just go with that.
Okay.
Um, the Hands
Yep.
of Havoc, who free society through chaos, they oppose rigid laws. They set fire to outdated and oppressive institutions, letting the ashes pave the way for something new. And they hide in warehouses, and they also masquerade as other factions to find if any faction gets too powerful and then tear it down. So it's sort of like a super souped up version of the Harpers, right? They're always looking for who's getting too powerful, but really to actively destroy them. Like they're not just, they really walk that walk, and I guess are constantly going through and tearing things down. So they're probably the most volatile, most dangerous, as described, of these factions.
Next, we have the Harmonium, who enforce peace through might, peace at any cost, sometimes education and sometimes enforcement with no flexibility or compassion. They form the barracks of the city, they patrol the city, and they keep records of all the arrests. So they are the
Mhm.
everything must be lawful and everyone must follow that law, even if we have to bust a few heads to do so.
Right. And they kind of make that distinction of some of them are more, violent minded than others. And it's like, okay, sure. Um, Next are the Heralds of Dust. We talked about these a bit because they show up in the digital release. They believe everyone is already dead. And the idea is that there are cycles of death. And somewhere, if one can find it, is the true final death, which takes you beyond this multiverse. What I like about this is that it probably is something that you'd think of, if you die in the mortal realm and suddenly you realize that, hey, you're in these outer planes, in these god planes, then you might sort of go like, well, wait, was that even death? Like there could be something else beyond this, right? Where would that be? So I like that concept. They process the dead in the mortuary, and many of them are undead. So I think they're a pretty fun faction.
Made me think of Terry Pratchett's Knack McFeagle from like Hatful of Sky in those books, because they're pixies and they think that they're dead. They think they died and came to this world, and now when they die in this world, they go back to the world of the living. So
Oh.
they sort of celebrate it, and
Hmm.
it's just a cycle of back and forth, which I
Yeah.
we see that in some real
Hmm.
world beliefs. So that's
Yeah.
kind of funny. Mercy killers. Mercy killers are next. They bring justice to the deserving. Uh, they are ruthless in what they do, so they can process the guilty, and they run the prisons.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the mind's eye who
Next.
grow to godhood. Growth and experiential learning leads not just to improvement, but to shaping reality. And you can see how somebody in Sigil would think so. So they are in the Foundry creating tools and parts, and they're all about understanding how things work, but through experiencing. You can't just be told, you must do it. And this will lead to gaining power and shaping reality. It's a little
Yep.
flimsy, but so are a lot of these. So
Hey. Yep. Hats off to all the machinists out there in the world listening. Uh, Next, we have the Society of Sensation, who find truth through experience. So, sensations and experiences lead to understanding the multiverse. They run the Civic Fest Hall, providing joy and diversion to the many citizens and visitors to Sigil. And the
the
final
yeah,
one
the transcendent
of the
order.
Ascendants.
Yeah, the last of the ascendants is the transcendent order who act unfettered by thought. Unify your mind and body until you don't need your mind to guide it. I've been working on this for years. So they
Mhm.
work in
Me
the
too.
or live in the great gymnasium, training their bodies so that they can just be all one, but without the mind part. Okay. Hmm.
Yeah.
Usually you think you transcend the body,
So
but this
those are
is
the
like transcending the mind. It's funny.
exactly. I'm trying to transcend everything. Uh Mind, body, soul, whatever. So those are the ascendants. Now we get some minor ones. There are three that are given right in this section. The Free League, who prize the individual foremost. The Incantarium, who consume magic and its secrets. And the Ring Givers, who give as much as they get. And charity is the path to enlightenment. These were obviously ones that were there before that have been sort of demoted in
Hmm.
this version, but they are still there. And then we get three other minor ones that aren't even mentioned in this, but they're mentioned in the section talking about under sigil. So I added them up here. The Coterie of Cakes, a destitute band of rosy cheeked bullies who assert the multiverse is a great multi-layered cake and that baked goods are its fundamental unit of trade. I remember seeing this in adventures from the from previous editions
Right.
of Planescape. The Revolutionary League, a once popular faction that fell away to disorganization. It's a mishmash of misfits and outcasts who vow to dismantle society. It's not unheard of to see people who don't want to be any sort of organization having trouble keeping an organization together. And finally, the Undivided, a faction composed wholly of creatures native to Sigil. They believe that those who pass through the planar portals are destroyed and replaced with clones.
I mean, you gotta love the Star Trek thing, right? If your matter is being
Mhm.
reconstituted, then
Yeah,
you were killed.
right.
Yeah,
And
I like it.
and what these final three show us, is that you can make your own as the
Yeah.
game master. If you want to make a faction of 7 people who the characters run into during an adventure, you can do so. And the characters may wipe them out if they are opposed to the characters. The characters may prop them up, and they become more and more powerful to the point of becoming ascendant. If enough people begin to join the faction and follow its tenets. So we have the factions out of the way. Let's just talk really quickly about the wards,
Hmm.
because the city is divided into these wards. And the factions sort of hold sway in different wards depending on where their headquarters are, or if this is the area where their specialty is handled.
Yeah.
So we have the clerk's ward, the hive ward, the ladies ward, the lower ward, the market ward, and under sigil. Do any of these stand out to you, or do you want to say anything about them, Teos, in general?
They're all neat. They play different roles, right? Clerk's Ward is all very like the stuff that makes a city run, with the Hall of Records and all kinds of stuff. The Hive Ward is sort of dangerous, and it feels like you wrote here, the scum and villainy area. The grease pit, where Justice Armand said, based on the fast food places he worked in Texas. These all these different neighborhoods can create different experiences. And so I definitely really like this about the city, right? I love in a city having a feel for why I go to different areas of it and what should be there. And this delivers on that. Especially in a city where the map is a little sort of loose and malleable, then this becomes very helpful for me to think through what kind of experiences to create.
And then you can play around in your own campaigns with what happens when one faction is wiped out.
Mm.
What happens
Yeah.
when the clerk's ward changes because the Society of Sensation is wiped out, or the fated are wiped out, right? The 1%, the rich are eaten. What happens when a different faction rises up, not just in terms of the plots that happen there, but the physical makeup of this ward. You can have a lot of fun with that as long as your
especially
players understand the story behind it.
especially when the coterie of cakes are the ones that eat the rich, then that's perfect.
Yes, let them eat cake and or the rich.
Yeah. I
Under sigil is its own special
Yep.
thing, because it's the sewers of the city, right? No faction is ascendant there. It's where things go when they need to escape the city, but they can't escape sigil. So they just sort of trickle down into the underbelly of the city, and that's there.
Yeah, I mean, my one worry about all of this is that this is a lot. Like, there is a lot happening here for a DM to juggle with. And it may be overwhelming, especially when you go in and say, like, well, already have maybe you came into this product thinking that you were going to deal with the outer planes. But no,
Mhm.
there's also, we'll talk about the gate towns. There's also the outlands and the outer planes and this complex city. So there's a lot here. And that's the one thing that I really worry about with Planescape is whether a DM picks this up and goes, I don't know how to possibly handle all this. There's a
Yep.
lot.
The good news is you can start small, right? When we
Yeah.
talk about world building, we talk about top down or bottom up.
Yeah.
Your campaign can be a bottom up campaign. You can set it in the market word, and you can say to the characters, this is the important thing that you need to do levels 1 to 4. You need to secure, and you can build a stronghold, right? A bastion, if you will.
Yeah.
You could build that there, and then you can slowly reveal the rest of this city, then slowly reveal the outlands, then slowly
Yeah.
reveal the other planes, and make just the smallest part of this rich setting real and fun and evocative to your players.
Yeah. I mean, it's more than you can possibly cover. I'm trying to think of a campaign where you could cover all these areas of this city and some of the gate towns, and it's just there's a lot here. And so you're right, you have to think about it. Like, there's a lot. Choose your favorites, weave the story with those favorites, start small, move slowly across those favorites, because there's more here than you could possibly
Yep,
use. So don't let it overwhelm you, because you're not going to use all of it. You couldn't. And then I'm curious,
exactly.
what does the
And
adventure
the
do?
last part of this chapter, exactly. The last part of this chapter just gives us 10 adventure hooks in Sigil, 6 missions that you can take on behalf of a faction, 8 calamities that can befall Sigil that your characters have to deal with, and then a D100 table that actually holds 35 encounters that you could have in Sigil. And they're basically just one word, or one phrase encounters. You come across 10 cranium rats, that sort of thing. So it's not in depth, but it's there to spur your imagination on if you need it. Whew. There we go. We've covered chapter
Well,
two.
what do you think about those? Can we just very quickly say these tables?
Mhm.
Good? Yay? No?
They're better than not having them there, but they don't do a lot for me other than to give me a blueprint for what the designers of this setting think Hook should be, what faction mission should be, what calamity should be, or what encounter should be.
Yeah.
So neither yay nor nay. It's
Yeah.
just it's there. They're going to do these tables, so there you go.
Yeah, I feel like I would take out this whole encounters table. I mean, I already have a monster section and stuff. Like it's not like it's hard to figure that out. Um, especially when these aren't tiered. So what does it matter? Um, I think what I would like is a little more of the Mike Shea approach of tell me what a campaign could look like, and I'd love to have here are three cool starts to being in Sigil, right? Rather than the adventure hooks, give me
Yep.
three cool starts, and I can choose one of them, and then give me the taking it from there, from those three cool starts, some additional things I could do to create a campaign, right? As the layers are peeled back, where would I go that would work with all three of them, right? Totally doable, and it'd be a lot of fun. And that way, you could choose your start that works for your party and know where you're going to go with some options and so on. That to me would be really useful beyond this because these things they're fine, they're good. You know, they learn that a terrifying war machine is being transported through Sigil for use in conquering a material plane world. It's a fun idea, but now I've got to go do a bunch of work and I'd like a little more than just a starter idea. I'd like to actually have some flesh on a skeleton that I could put flesh upon at least more than just a concept.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I would have rather seen it. I think at this point in the campaign, at this point in the edition's life cycle, with this particular product, you're not going to get new players, new DMs coming in and buying this. I mean, obviously some will, but for me, this book is for people who know how to put together campaigns already. So while what you're saying absolutely should be there, I would prefer it to be there. I don't I don't give too many demerits to this chapter for
So
that
I'm
reason.
going to disagree with you because fifth edition has been remarkable, remarkable for its growth and bringing in new players, right? And half of all players are new to the edition. And then I think of things like there was a great video a while back, long ago, that on Lubofin's channel where she reviewed uh, Tomb of Annihilation and said, I picked this up because it looked cool, and then I realized, oh, it's super deadly, and I realized I don't really want to run a super deadly campaign. And I'm like, yeah, like it totally should say, it should make it clear what this is, and that if you're relatively new to running campaigns, what is the experience that this is going to provide? And I don't know that Planescape comes with some, warning or knowledge or whatever. It's sold as if everything should be great, like all other products on the shelf, but it's obviously not true, right? This is quite complex, and I would recommend it not to a new person, but to an experienced person, but that's not what ends up landing. Like someone's going to buy this, someone's going to get this and a player's handbook for Christmas, and you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think Tomb of Annihilation was different because it's an adventure rather than a setting,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of the other information that we've already read in this book up to this point can help someone get along. I'm not trying to say don't put in what you said
Yeah, yeah,
because I think that would have been 100% better. Uh, I'm just like I said, I'm not going to like 1 star would never buy
right,
because they chose to do this rather than uh,
yeah,
spelling it out a little more clearly. That's all.
yeah, agreed.
But next time we will look at chapter 3, Sigil and the Outlands. The Outlands. We will finally reach those dreaded Outlands and see what's going on there. Whew. We made it through chapter 2. Didn't know if we would make it, but we did, Teos. We did. And you know who else made it through chapter 2? All our listeners. So thank you for listening. Thank you for backing us on Patreon if you do so. like I said at the beginning of the other show, hearing people say that they listen to the show and that they appreciate what we talk about, it helps them in their game mastering or playing or adventure creation or campaign creation. We totally appreciate that. It gives us strength, as does having backers. Having backers helps us do these things that we do. So if you are a backer, if you're a Master of Dungeons backer, thank you so much. If you're a Master of Realms patron, thank you. You have a special shout out in our show notes. And for you Masters of the Multiverse, we read you on the show, as we will right now with Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. It was a great chatting with you at Gamehole Con, Keith. Craig Bailey, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, thanks for the question. Evil John, DM Chad, Darren Chandler, Seth Eckel, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon, Nathan Fuller, The Mighty Jerd, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Shawn Hurst. Sorry we missed you at Gamehole Con, Shawn. Next time. Chad Jackson, Brian King, Jim Klingler, aka DM Prime Mover, Chad Lynch, great seeing you at Gamehole Con, The Math Magician, Eric Menge, The Micro Ant, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Robert Paisley, great to see you and run a game for you, Robert. Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Ross Sandberg, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simose, David Somerville from Prismanox.com, the 5e space opera setting, Joe Tyler, James Walton, and last but not least, Graham Ward. Graham, great to see you too. Thanks to all our listeners and all our patrons. If you like the show, please do consider supporting our Patreon. It's at patreon.com/masteringdnd. Also, if you get a chance, leave us a review on Apple Podcast or whatever means you listen to our show. You can also subscribe via our YouTube channel if you want to see us in the flesh. Teos, where can people find you?
You can find me at alphastream.org. From there, you can get to all my videos, my blog posts, and everything else. And Shawn, I can find you where?
You can find me on all the social medias is at Shawn Merwin. You can also find the podcast at Mastering D&D, Twitter, Dice Camp, Mastodon, Blue Sky now. You can always find us at the Patreon, ask questions there via our Discord, which you get access to if you join our Patreon. And we answer questions on our YouTube channel, Mastering Dungeons. So, Teos, we have dealt with the factions and we have traversed the wards of Sigil. What are we going to do now?
Well, I'm going to start my own faction where it's going to be all about how we have to find this mythical place called Columbia and perfect the amazing cup of coffee. If you get a good enough cup of coffee, the secrets of the multiverse are unlocked.
And I will probably be in the middle of a bender in the high board. We'll see you there.